For those of you that don't already know me, my name is Deep. I am often around in the Filecoin Plus ecosystem side of things. You may have seen me from the biweekly governance call recordings, and of course, available and reachable on Filecoin Slack if you have any questions or want to discuss. Filecoin Plus is unique because it adds this layer of social trust to a network that's otherwise like trustless, to incentivize like useful storage and leveraging the network in good and useful ways, so that we can help Filecoin effectively deliver its value and its mission in becoming a data store for humanity's most critical information. So how does that actually work? So Filecoin Plus itself was inspired in some way by Dr. Ostrom's Nobel-winning work governing the commons, based on which a set of principles were defined. I'm just going to chat about these briefly, and I think ZX might discuss them a little bit in his presentation later on as well. But these are the 7 principles that were originally defined in the FIP through which Filecoin Plus was actually established, which is FIP 0003. If any of you are interested in going to look at the Filecoin Improvement Program's repo and checking out the original write-up that drove the actual development of Filecoin Plus. The 7 principles are decentralization and diversity. So this is both in terms of geographic representation, but also use cases. It's also types of people and perspectives and different interaction points that are coming into the ecosystem. Transparency and accountability. So as Filecoin is a blockchain, we can track actions and messages on the chain, and using that to ensure that like things are actually executing in a way that we can confirm that the trust is being rewarded with follow-up is good and an important thing. Community governance, like bringing together different perspectives of people that are active in the community, have a voice, have something interesting to share, would like to improve the structure of the program is a key to how this program actually operates. Low cost dispute resolution. The idea that like everybody here has the ability to flag if something isn't really working, if something isn't going the way it was supposed to go, is important in maintaining like a longer term balance. Limited trust earned over time. As we discuss a little bit more about the core mechanisms that drive Filecoin Plus, this will start to make a little bit more sense about in terms of the interaction points that exist between the different stages and the different players in this ecosystem. Compliance, ensuring that you're actually complying with these principles and upholding sort of the value of the Filecoin network. And last but certainly not least, the ultimate goal of building a useful storage network. So the core mechanism is that, and I'm just going to read this out, and this phrase will not make sense to many of you at the moment. And my hope is that at the end of this talk, this will make sense to you. So we're going to start by reading this out just so you have sort of the overview, and then we'll dive into different portions of this so you can understand and break this down and see how the different components really come together in Filecoin Plus. So root key holders, notaries, clients, and miners interact through the through the allocation and spending of DataCap. Notaries retrieve DataCap in batches and allocate it to trustworthy clients that spend the DataCap to fund storage deals, and miners that receive DataCap receive a 10x boost to their quality adjusted power for the storage space offered in such deals, which increases their block reward share in the network. So let's talk about what that actually means. So that means there's a set of these stakeholders in this ecosystem, root key holders, notaries, clients, miners. They interact through something called DataCap, which some of you may not know much about yet. And you can see that a lot of these arrows have DataCap written on them, and we'll get into that shortly. And through this spending and allocation of this DataCap, this program sort of comes together with the end result being that a miner, which is at the receiving end of all of these arrows, receives a boost effectively to the rewards that they get from the network. So let's get into this. What exactly is DataCap? This is a question that I certainly get almost every single week. And DataCap itself should be defined as a novel resource that exists within the Filecoin network. Clients that receive DataCap can use it to make storage deals. So what that actually means is when a client is negotiating with a miner, today that often happens based on like a price, like valued in Filecoin. But DataCap can also be seen as a resource that can be used, that is exchanged for the service of storing data on behalf of the miner for that particular client. And as DataCap is actually used from that particular client address, it is consumed. So it is like a one-time use from like the client address to the client wallet as it's being leveraged to store useful information onto the network. And then miners that receive DataCap for the amount of storage that they're providing corresponding or commensurate with the DataCap that's coming in for it, there's an adjustment to their presence on chain effectively. And so what ends up happening is miners today measure their ROI or the expected rewards in the network by looking at their presence on that network, because that's defining for how likely they are to win block rewards over time. And with DataCap, what ends up happening is for the amount of space that a miner is dedicated to a deal, they get a 10x quality multiplier effectively for having served this deal. So they're grossly incentivized to store these particular clients' information onto the network reliably, securely over a long period of time, and build up a reputation in doing so, because it benefits their long-term business. And as a result, it benefits the client that's actually bringing their legitimate use case on top of the Filecoin network. So just once again, DataCap is just a novel resource that exists within the network. Clients use it effectively as a way in which they could pay to get the service of storage, and miners receive DataCap from clients effectively that ends up boosting their quality adjusted power and therefore their long-term rewards in the network over time. It's just a number. And so how does it actually work? You see this complex sort of diagram at the bottom. Let's dig into like each of these little boxes and how it actually flows. So the set of stakeholders that I cited right at the start was root key holders, notaries, clients, and miners interact with the allocation and spending of DataCap. So there's at least 4 there, which is root key holders, notaries, clients, and miners. And then the 5th one, which is very important stakeholder, is the actual governance community, which could even be you. So for the first one, root key holders. So root key holders act as executors for decisions that are actually made by the governance community. So what that actually means is they're representatives of reputable organizations in our ecosystem. So whether that's Filecoin or IPFS or just the Web3 space, they are tactically signers to a multi-sig wallet, which has the power to grant notary status and grant DataCap to someone that has been given notary status, as well as the power to remove notaries. And we'll be chatting about notaries next. But what you should know about root key holders is that they're the ones that actually execute decisions that are being taken by the governance community on chain in a timely manner. So they're the follow-up effectively of conversations that happen to build this trust, whether that's through like GitHub issues or conversations that happen in our governance calls or on Slack. When decisions are being made by this community, the root key holders are the ones that are actually responsible for bringing that on chain and ensuring that there's a representation of that on the blockchain. You can read more about the root key holder role at the specific link below. So let's talk a little bit more about notaries. Notaries are, in a way, a very critical sort of core building role for the Filecoin Plus program, and are responsible for like the key sort of mechanism that exists, which is like giving DataCap to clients that are worthy of using that DataCap to go make deals. So let's dig into that a little bit. So notaries are fiduciaries of the network. They're there to serve the network, to ensure that the network grows in a positive direction and is delivering the value that it should for the rest of humanity. The way in which they do that is by allocating DataCap to clients that receive it and that then subsidizes their reliable and useful storage services on the network over a period of time. How that happens is that clients will reach out to notaries to say, hey, I have this particular use case. I am using Filecoin for whatever reason it may be. That's valuable to the world. It's public, open data that could be retrievable by anyone. It's useful, and I want to bring it onto the network. And so ask me whatever questions you need of me and give me this DataCap so I can put data onto the network easily. And so the role of the notary is to say, okay, great, makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more and do the requisite due diligence so that DataCap can be awarded sort of commensurate with the amount of trust that that client can be given, as well as the reputation they may have and the work they may be doing onto the network. The work they might be doing to bring more useful data onto the network. And so they verify these clients through a process of due diligence, which is different for each notary. And we might even hear a little bit about that in the community showcase section of this summit. But the intent here is that they ensure that the allocation of DataCap that they're making goes to parties that are worthy of that, because they're about to receive much cheaper storage, much lower friction to move storage onto the Filecoin network, and use that and ensure that it's not being misused or sort of given excessive leverage anyway, because it is a pretty important lever that exists within the network. There's also a set of like operational guidelines and auditing expectations for people that serve as notaries. And so, of course, complying with that is part of their role and their set of responsibilities as well. And so you might be asking, like, how does one even become a notary? So we actually have 14 notaries today. We went through a notary election process right at the start of this calendar year, and we're about to go through our second one. More on that during the community governance section of today's conference. But yeah, notaries are selected through this like notary election process, which includes like writing a fairly lengthy application, which is reviewed and graded based on a set of criteria that are maintained actually by the community itself. So the community, one of the things that the community works on is editing these criteria, editing the rubrics through which applications are graded. And so based on that, notaries are selected in as objective manner as possible, based on factors that we as a community have sort of agreed as good indicators of somebody that can truly serve the network, almost altruistically, but also more generally in that they are stakeholders of Filecoin. Oftentimes this is as simple as also holding Filecoin and knowing that like as the network does better, it's likely that the value will go up. So you can read a little bit more about the notary role as well at the link that I've shared below. Cool. Clients. So this one, some of you are probably a little bit more familiar with, but a client is one of the participants in the demand side of the Filecoin network. A client in the Filecoin Plus ecosystem specifically is typically looking to store open, publicly available and retrievable data onto the network, and has received DataCap from a notary through an application to that notary through the processes, has gotten through effectively the due diligence and the processes of that specific notary. And they're now looking to allocate that DataCap to make deals on the network, and will do so responsibly, which means storing with a diverse set of miners geographically and in numbers, and replicating that data to ensure that it stays safe, making use of like the services that exist like fast retrieval to ensure that it is retrievable both for them and for others, because typically this is data that other people might also be interested in, and of course not violating the terms of service of a miner as a good acting client that might have to do with local regulation or other policies that the miner may set in place. And last of this set from the diagram, miners. Miners are the supply side of the Filecoin network. They're making storage deals with clients so that they can increase their rewards on the network over time. And they're incentivized to take deals from these clients that have gone through this verification process with a notary and have been given DataCap, because DataCap increases their block rewards for that particular part of their footprint on chain by 10x. And so it is very useful as a lever to incentivize miners to have special pricing, often lower pricing for the category of deals that comes from such clients, which are called verified deals. And recommendation to you, if you haven't already done this and you're a miner that's looking to store DataCap, but just in general, a miner participating in the Filecoin Plus ecosystem is typically someone who's also self-selected themselves into being on the Filecoin Plus registry. So there's actually a page which has like a list of miners, and that's driven by a markdown file in the client onboarding repo of Filecoin Plus. So if you're a miner, you're watching this session, you're interested in storing deals from verified clients or looking to make verified deals, I would say head over to that GitHub link and just PR yourself onto that so that you too are more discoverable. Last, the Filecoin Plus governance community. So this includes people that are in the previous sections as well. So they may be notaries, clients, miners, and other interested members of the community. That certainly includes you if you're here watching today. And you might be asking, like, what is the role of this particular part or this set of stakeholders? And the role is effectively to help drive this program forward. Come to meetings, understand different perspectives, talk through different complexities, talk through different issues. We have a ton of interesting things that we need to work through together. Like governance is a pretty challenging aspect, especially when it comes to a system that's this complex and has such a interesting problem of like building trust in a trustless world in a way. And so, all sorts of topics ranging from like, what is fine in terms of clients storing data with themselves, or how should we ensure the DataCap is reaching all geographies in the world? How do we ensure that there's enough DataCap reaching all geographies in the world? What parts of the program do we want to standardize on? Like what parts of the program do we want to allow nuanced solutions for? So an interesting topic that we'll be discussing in today's governance call is like, how do we serve clients that are bringing like massive data sets to Filecoin Plus? So that includes like things that are like greater than 500 petabytes, basically. So if a client has like a massive public data set in the petabyte scale and is interested in storing that on the network, and we as a community believe that that's, you know, worthy use case of Filecoin, and we'd be excited to support it, then how do we actually like distribute DataCap at scale? And then how do we actually audit that the client is complying with what they said they would be? What are ways in which we can actually, you know, move forward in terms of transparency? This is like the first time anybody's like thinking about these problems at this scale. And so it's a pretty exciting set of things to talk through. And so we'd be more than excited to have more people in the room. And the way in which you participate in that is by joining the Filecoin Plus channel, of course, on Filecoin Slack. That's a public channel. So as long as you're on Filecoin Slack, you should be able to search it and join it. Participating in the community governance calls. Those happen every other Tuesday. We actually rotate the time zones for those. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what they are, but if you take a look at the Filecoin community events calendar, you can add that to your calendar. And the intent is at least one of every 2 calls you should be able to join, depending on where you are in the world. So it might be really late at night, or it might be really early in the morning for you. And if that's inconvenient, sorry, we're trying to, you know, of course, shepherd a lot of different time zones. But we have adjusted it so that there's like a staggered sort of like 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening for most people. And so you should be able to join one of them. And of course, if it turns out that you can't join any of them, then that's a conversation worth happening, because we certainly don't want to keep anybody not from being able to participate in this community. The recordings for all those calls are available on YouTube. So if you actually go to the Filecoin channel on YouTube, there should be a playlist that just has like all the governance calls so far, or at least a subset, because we only started doing that a couple of months ago. And this will probably be on the Filecoin YouTube channel, of course, but the governance call that we're going to have later on in the summit will also be there. And the intent is to continue doing that, because we want to build a store and historic tracking effectively of how we're making decisions as well. And so if you're just catching up, it's never too late to start. Check out the playlist, watch some of the recordings, and then come join us at the next call, which will happen in like 2 hours if you're still here, or in 2 weeks. And the last bit I'd flag is, even if you're not able to make it to the calls, or you're just watching in the channel, the actual way in which decisions get pushed mostly is through like conversation and discussion that happens in the notary governance repo. So the repo that's linked right at the bottom of the slide has something like 15, 16 current open issues of ranging complexity, all the way from like dispute resolution, audit tracking, to some of the topics we discussed around like supporting larger data sets and figuring out better models of like distributing DataCap. And so feel free to just go to the repo, read on some of the issues themselves, leave your thoughts in comments. Oftentimes we'll see people do a conjunction of both that as well as participating in the Filecoin Plus channel to ensure that like active conversation is happening across all of these fronts. Okay, so what I want to do is go back to this diagram now, because we've talked about a bunch of different words on this thing, but now we need to make sure that it actually makes sense. So we talked about the root key holders, which are the executors of information that's actually happening on chain. The notaries, that are the fiduciaries of the network that are actually allocating DataCap to like clients that they believe are worthy of that DataCap. And so you can see the vets and approves request coming in from a client. And as a result, DataCap is being allocated to the client. And then clients take that DataCap and have it as associated with like a wallet address. And when making a storage deal from that address, their DataCap effectively is deployed. And that incentivizes a miner, because a miner receives a 10x deal quality multiplier. So you understand the core sort of mechanism that drives Filecoin Plus. And then the last bit I would say is the blue box that we didn't talk about until just the very end, which is the community governance aspect, which includes the defined rubric through which notaries are actually selected. So every time we have an election cycle, the notary applications are parsed and scored against this rubric. And as a result, n number of notaries are selected. And then that goes to the root key holders who actually sign that onto the chain. And so again, there's the benefit of this being on a blockchain, of course, is that everything's being written as a message somewhere to a block and can all be tracked. And that's sort of what the bottom third of this diagram represents. Cool. So hopefully at this point, you look at this and you're not as confused as you were as when we started this talk. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. I'll take a look at the chat briefly. But yeah, what should you do now? So probably you should stay for the rest of this day because you'll learn a bunch from the upcoming sessions, and it's going to be really exciting, and you'll probably get exposed to a bunch of different things. But maybe more specifically, make sure you go through like the following set of resources if you're just catching up. So of course, join the channel in Filecoin Slack and come along to our governance bi-weekly calls. But also, we now have like documentation that's been published on docs.filecoin.io, which is of course always a work in progress. So if you've got suggestions and thoughts on that, please feel free to open up an issue or make an improvement directly and PR it, and I'll be sure to take a look and integrate the improvements that you might have. There's the client onboarding repository, which we haven't really talked about, and so I'll just spend a second on that. The client onboarding repository is also the one, by the way, where the miner listing is. So if you're a miner that wants to get onto that, you want to head over there and look for miners.md. But that repo is sort of the central flow of like applications. So like in this diagram, where we have this dotted box, like this dotted box sort of happens in that repo. So if you look through the issues of that repo, you'll see, the 300 plus applications that have come in for clients, which are asking for like X amount of DataCap each, with some sort of basic explanation on who they are, and then notaries that have carried out a due diligence process, which may include asking more questions about their background, their funding sources, what their project actually entails, a little bit more about their data set and what they're actually bringing onto the network, their intended use of the DataCap that they'd be rewarded. So that could include how they'll allocate it, how they'll find miners, what sort of deals they'll make, etc. And then based on that, like decisions being made by notaries that include like granting or not for like that particular client. So all of that can be seen in this repo in case you're curious. But also if you're a client that's looking to apply for DataCap, this and the docs are probably where you want to start, and they'll point you sort of in the right direction, which oftentimes will be what's in the last bullet here, which is the Filecoin Plus registry. So if you're actually a client that wants to go get DataCap today, the first path is to go to this site called verify.glyph.io. That will get you your first small allocation of DataCap, which is 32 gigabytes, which you should be able to use to do some basic testing. But once you run out of that and you want something a little bit larger scale, you probably want to head over to this site, where you'll be able to click through the flow for a client and actually make your own application for DataCap, which of course will show up as an issue on the client onboarding repo. And that'll be your primary interaction point with the notary that you've chosen to work with, who will be vetting you. And last, just mentioned on the previous slide as well, which is the notary governance repo. So this is sort of the central community governance and notary repo, where we do a bunch of decisions and discussion around how the program itself is evolving, but also where elections are run from, as well as like where we do a bunch of the dispute resolution stuff. And so this repo is all the hot topics of Filecoin Plus. If you want to go see what the open conversations are, if you want to participate in shaping the program, that's where I'd head over to. Check out the open issues and make sure to read through some of the readmes that might help. That's also where we have some descriptions, especially around like the root key holder role and the notary role in much greater detail than I covered today. So if you're interested in reading a little bit more about the specifics of the operational responsibilities and the roles, then please feel free to check that out as well. And of course, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Deep Kapoor on the Filecoin Slack if you have any questions. Certainly available on the Filecoin Plus channel. That's probably the fastest way to get a hold of me.